Hey, hey. Yes.
I have to do an introduction. Well, welcome. Um, it's a pleasure, to have Barclay and Cruz give this evening's Bear Like a keynote, which is a series that brings together speakers from a diverse disciplinary perspectives and different geographic, cultural, and political contexts to speak on how their work engages with contemporary issues and debates. Barclay and Cruz is an architecture studio founded in 1994 in Paris by Sandra Barclay and Jean-Pierre Cruz. The firm relocated to Lima, Peru in 2006, where it is currently based. The studio is known for its wide range of architecture projects that focus on the relationship between landscape, climate, and architecture. Their work explores how architecture can respond to specific conditions in developing countries while remaining relevant in a global context. Thank you for being here all the way from Lima to Delft. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you for the invitation. We are really pleased to be here to share our work. Thank you, Salomon, Dick, and Juan. and
Thank
okay.
you all for being here.
So as Solomon was saying, we, Jean-Pierre and me, we were born and trained in Peru. Then we uh, we went to Paris to work there. Like, so our starting experience professionally was in Paris, and 16 years after we moved to Peru, we went back to Peru, and we had to readapt or adapt ourselves to a very different condition and processes, and that really reshape the way we do architecture.
Yeah, and in Peru, we found that the opportunities were to be found in the problems, searching for openings offered by a unstructured society to find operative strategies amongst precarious conditions. The fragility of the Commission itself, the scarcity of technical and economic resources, define specific problems and opportunities that we had to identify in our own terms. Of course, this is more easily said than done. As South American societies have a solid cultural dependence on the narratives of the first world or the developed world. So, but we were conscious about, more and more conscious working in Peru about what we were looking for. Richard Long, working a line in Peru in the 1970s, left this trace in the desert, and this trace was supposed to be ephemeral. It's still there. And he explained this action as just one more layer, I'm quoting him, a mark laid upon the thousands of other layers of human and geographic history on the surface of land. So, in fact, whatever we do has an impact on Earth, even walking. No? So, when we build something, it has to be worth the impact we make, we believe. But how can we identify the value of what we are doing? For us, value is finding meaning, in purpose, in pertinence. As the Chilean professor Fernando Perez, which we appreciate, put it, he says, architecture is nothing but construction charged with meaning. So, going back to Peru, being there, we felt the reason for architecture were inseparable from the consideration of a larger scale, which is not only defined by dimensions, territorial dimension or landscape dimensions, but not only by geography, climate, etc., but also the intangible layers of learnings from the people who preceded us and the knowledge of actual people working with what they find in place. And when confronted with the Andes, and we discovered that more when we came back than when we were there, Alexander von Humboldt acknowledged this change of scale also and synthesized them in this remarkable drawing. He found a local culture intimately tied to the land. And he realized that biodiversity in the Andes was conditioned by altitude and not latitude. So that changed a lot of things that he believed at that time, of the sense of nature, etc. But for us, this section is very important because he could synthesize a whole continent, subcontinent, in a section, and not in a plan. The section is more important than the plan. And that for us was very important also coming back to Peru.
And in some way, we did the opposite trip as Humboldt did. So we went first to Europe to understand our reality. During the following years, we developed a sense of observation, thinking through drawings. And we tested these thoughts as in a laboratory by the doing through projects. Each project informed the next one on its strategies and approach to similar problems. So in each project, we like to go from the sketch to the model, to the precise drawing, to the reality, and then back again to sketch, model, and the precise drawing, in a circular dynamic between mind, hand, and matter. Our built projects, shown here at the same scale, cover a large span of different programs, dimensions, locations, but are all related by these questions. In each one, we try to convey a sense of belonging by being coherent with climate conditions, pre-existences, and cultural memory. In addition, we seek to use available materials involving local craftsmanship and giving labor agency in the construction process. And today we'll show you some of these projects, trying to understand them from the section as Humboldt understood the territory. And they are all in Peru.
So the W houses were a series of houses designed in this little cove during 6 years, the first 6 years that we were, when we started working in Peru. And with the absence of rains, hot in summer, cold in winter, so without any extreme weather condition, we tried to imagine how to do architecture without this essential role in other parts of the world where shelter is a main thing. So topography gave us the keys to intervene. And again, we draw first the slope of the cove, then an emerging platform in order to define a new horizontal ground for life. After that, we define an enclosure that ensures domesticity and intimacy, providing shade to the platform and framing the ocean view. Finally, a pool brings the ocean to the platform and serves as a natural railing. And underneath, we excavate the platform to create the rooms for intimacy, so the bedrooms mainly, protected from the setting sun by the pool itself. And while social spaces ensure intimacy, the more playful space of the pool is a place where neighbors can relate and know each other if they want. All the houses follow the same logic, even if they are all following different needs. And seen from the beach at right hand, the whole seems to emerge from the cliff, while on the left, the other side, from the desert, it seems to be excavated on the sand. This duality is also present between the house's exterior and interior, where an enclosure protects intimacy. So from the exterior is a very plain and opaque volume. And then we cross a threshold and we get into another exterior space where intimacy can take its place and be perceived as an outdoor interior. And here, of course, as you can see, the difference between interior and exterior is not defined by airtightness, but the degree of intimacy we provide. And so all the social spaces are open, as you can see in the lower image. And then this is conceived like almost an artificial beach with a big mat, straw mat shade. And then in the lower level, the intimate spaces of the bedrooms are underneath this platform. And we will show some short videos of some projects in order that you can understand what the space, which is very difficult to understand only by images. Do we have the mic?
The mic,
Because
no.
it's not. Yeah. So you can have some sound. One of the reasons this is a desert is because the water is very cold. even if it's the coldest water in a location near the equator. So it
The
makes
ocean, huh? The ocean.
the ocean. So it makes all the coast from Ecuador to Patagonia a very dry desert.
We don't have any rain at all.
So, as architects, we said it, we must be very careful when adding these layers. No? And one thing Rafael Moneo said that is important for us, he was a member of the jury for the building that is in the lower image. He said that it is crucial for the architect to discern those attributes of the site that should be maintained and emphasized, and those that should disappear in the new reality that emerges with the new project. So all the findings that we did in the first years while designing these houses, in a quite harsh topography, were useful when we go face to face with a much bigger project that was the place of remembrance.
So it's on the edge of Lima's Bay, where a national competition was launched to build this place for remembrance project. It's about making a place for reconciliation of Peruvian people, a cultural center that would articulate the efforts of an entire generation to convey to the future ones the memory of 20 years of extreme violence that devastated our country and left 70,000 deaths. This place has become vital in the aspiration to prevent repeating the errors of the past. And we thought the building couldn't relate with the memory of violence, as architecture is meant to dignify people. So we started by the site's own memory. It was a residual area left by the destruction of one of these cliffs when a roadway to the beaches was created. And we decided our intervention should mend the broken succession of cliffs and ravines, so to relate to the memory of the place, like if we were reestablishing a pre-existence. If we draw a cut-off longitudinal section of the cliffs, we can visualize the infill made to create the descent to the beach. A compact building near the natural cliff allows us to economize both on the number of foundation piles and in their depth. In this way, the territorial logic meets the economic logic. This strategy allowed to propose a public esplanade that wasn't required in the competition's brief. So the site had still a strong handicap. There was almost no connection to the city. This major problem was turned into a design opportunity by creating a narrow passage connecting the city to the site, or the urban avenue to the site. By doing that, we introduce time in the way we approach the building. The visitor can take the time to distance himself from the city and leave daily preoccupations behind. As we walk, we get into a gap created between the cliff and the building. At the bottom of this newly created ravine, there is a marked physical consciousness, a kind of intensified presence. We are no more in an urban setting, nor in a natural landscape. We are ready for an exhibit which is not easy to see. And at the other side of this artificial cliff, there is a platform that overlooks the sea, that is conceived as a public space for reconciliation. The ramps help to slow down the time and separate the path of the eyes from the path of the feet. So the experience of a space in time is enhanced. Space is made only by the building's structure. Nothing more, no layerings. This is an image of the completed building before the collection came in. We follow the ramps until we discover the horizon at the rooftop, conceived as a new ground. At the end of the exhibition, from there, visitors get back to the city. And this is another video to show you how the building is living, or yeah.
This is a very polemic project till now, or institution, let's say. Last year it was closed for the 4th time because it's not only telling about the years of violence, but also about corruption in the government. So each time something is exhibited and doesn't like to the government, it gets shut down. But it's still open now, which is a very good sign.
The building grew by layers in 2 years, as the alluvial cliffs did in a much longer time. Although it was not a conscious aim when designing this project, the building became topography. It resonated at the territorial scale. In that way, our addition would be related to memory not only by its programmatic content, but by the memory of Lima's landscape.
And this was a common thing to do, a common design strategy of the people who preceded us, because they transformed the Central Andes for more than 5,000 years. And that was a real learning lesson for us. When intervening as architects, it is crucial to understand this layering of memories, because we are going to add some more. No? So, of course, not in a nostalgic way, but as an opportunity to learn the possible ways to cope with our contemporary challenges. For instance, the pre-Columbian people that lived there knew how to build the landscape, or build in the landscape, and increase biodiversity, which is a good thing for us now to explore. An international competition was made near that site that you see in the upper side, for designing an agricultural research center with lodging facilities. And Moray is an Incan agricultural laboratory near Cusco, and it was made to domesticate plants to the higher altitudes, because here we are in 3,800 meters, so 3,800 meters high. So instead of an agricultural base center, we propose in the competition that research should focus on water management more than in agriculture, because in the era of global warming, this is the critical thing that will alter all the Andes by the melting of the glaciers, of the tropical glaciers. So in order to intervene here and make this place inhabitable at such a high altitude, we follow the same strategies the Incas employed in these places. So taking advantage of the existing topography and orientations to create favorable conditions for life with a minimum of effort to achieve these goals. A careful use of the site's topography, combining excavation and infill, allowed us to take advantage of an existing ravine and the existing slope for bringing natural light to all spaces with a minimum impact on the landscape. This site is protected also by the Ministry of Culture, so we had to be very humble and careful about this new layer. But the building is also conceived not only as a building, but as a water retaining infrastructure. There's, as most of pre-Columbian intervention that served for both living and domesticating the harsh landscape. So we were doing a large intervention, but very delicate, where all the logistic of the water management and the research center were in protected platforms given to the ravine, while from Moray, from the archaeological site, the earth movement is almost invisible from there. And with these excavations and infill, we could create this first big space where there's a water retaining pond and all these sunken patios where vegetation could grow easier. So in the first one, we decided that what is the main water reservoir is nourished with infiltration canals, and the landscape is a non-landscape. We didn't intervene at all, only by this infrastructural water retaining means. And then there's a gap where we can get into the building. In the upper image, you see the water retaining reservoirs that are beneath this shallow pool. And on the other side, there are these sunken gardens with these queñuales that are the only trees to grow in that altitude.
Mm-hmm. It was a competition we won, and now we are like in permit processes, and that takes a lot of time. And so we go back to the coast. The Paracas Archaeological Site Museum so is situated in a remote place of this extremely arid coastal desert. It's south of from Lima, and was destroyed by a strong earthquake in 2007. And foreign funds were used to rebuild a new one, and an architectural competition was launched. And our proposal kept the memory of the previous museum by building in the exact same location, respecting the overall volume and geometry, as a way like to preserve the memory of that previous layer of intervention. The building is not conceived as an object in the landscape. It does not frame it from the interior. It is meant to create another layer of meaning, creating a relation of reciprocity. Seen from the archaeological burial site, the museum modifies landscape and at the same time depends on it, as would a rock or a trace in the desert. The building has a quite simple and fluid plan. In section, the first decision is to downscale the vastness of the landscape by an enclosure. The enclosed space is then covered by a folding roof conceived as a fifth facade, as it is seen from the burial site. The folding allowed to protect the interior from the harsh sun and the strong winds of this region, while allowing for aeolic ventilation and natural lighting. The foldings contain a series of low-tech environmental devices that help define the exhibition spaces. These low-tech environmental devices help control natural light and ventilation. Actually, the museum works without any artificial light. It closes when the sun sets. More technological equipment will be possible to install in these technical spaces in the future. They also help define the exhibition spaces and organize the museographical sequence in a continuous and fluid space. From the desert, a porch announces the entrance, acting as a threshold between the vastness and an outdoor interior space, which connects all the different spaces of the program. In a place where rain is inexistent, they can relate each other through this contained exterior space. The environmental devices mark the entrances and are also the structural frame of the building. When reaching the southern facade, they become windows looking to the burial site, to the burial hill. And the exterior is finished with the same polished ceramic technique for finishing the pre-Columbian bases, rescaled to the size of the building. We used a naturally reddish pozzolanic cement that was hand-polished as a way to stay within the budget.
Yeah, in fact, we are in a country where craftsmanship is still less expensive than industrialized construction. So we consider that as a huge advantage. We give people more work. It's very different from Europe, I know, but the buildings are built by hand. they leave traces. No? They show the imperfections of the handmade. But on the other side, the workers are not anymore invisible. They are still there. Because the traces left reveal the presence of their work. So it's the presence of their absence that introduces one more layer of meaning, as is the moving sand, another layer that constantly modifies the landscape and the building. And in the W houses, the first ones that we showed, local craft tradition gave us clues about forgotten or misused or undervalued materials, as this straw mat that is typical in the coastal houses. And we thought to live in this region, that's the only three elements that you see at left. An enclosure for sleeping, and then an open space with a bench and a shade. In the place of remembrance, we had only $4 million to do this building, so and we had a lot of time. It's the only place for memory in Latin America that was built despite the government, without any help from public national funding. So we decided that craftsmanship and limited resources were the choices we had to mix in order to give meaning to this building. And we made the handmade imperfection our ally in a certain way. We employed more labor, and in this context, the design process did not finish with the execution plans, but it was a constant dialogue with the people that were building this. And that expanded the notion of memory, not only to the place that we were dealing with, but also to the building process. So suddenly the construction plans were no longer indispensable, and the building started to draw a map of the human intervention, no? With all these imperfections. And the pebbles of the cliff, for instance, were used in the pavement, and we asked the workers to arrange them in the way they consider the best. So today we can recognize these differences between one section and the other. And it becomes, in a certain way, the visible memory of human intervention. And what is amazing is that the caring about the well-done construction. There's care in the construction, which, of course, is not a synonym of perfection, but is a thing that we try to develop in this project and in the other ones. And the handprints in the lower entrance was decided as a tribute to the people that literally built the building with their hands. And at that time, we decided to leave all the traces, errors, intended or not, as, for instance, the traces of the watchdog that you saw in the other photo. in the ramps. So it's really telling all the process all the way through. But even we were talking about handmade, but even when we employ prefab elements as these louvers for the University of Piura, fabrication tolerance is not the same, because as in a developed country, we thought at the beginning that we could have a tolerance of the millimeters, and we found these prefab panels had a tolerance of the centimeter range. So this opened a possibility of finding other solutions during the site works. So we determined the starting point of the facade that were only the west facade with these louvers, and we decided to leave some of them open because they wouldn't fit. And with those panels, we did like an extra parking for bicycles. And on the other hand, for another project, this time the Moquegua Regional Government Headquarters, we used also precast concrete panels as permanent shutterings for the structure. And we had, by our budget, we were allowed to use two colors of concrete, and the local cement plant, because in the desert there's a lot of cement plants. It's all is found on the site. They couldn't produce the right colors, so we took this as a huge advantage, because we had a building that has each panel has a different color, and that was an amazing thing.
An architectural competition was organized to build these government headquarters, not far from the Chilean border, at the gate of the Atacama Desert. The building is located in a new cultural and commercial neighborhood at the edge of the city. New high ground is created by a plinth that contains services and archives. A compact structure gives place to a public square in continuity with an atrium. The atrium frames the views of the city and the landscape. On top, different buildings are separated by narrow courtyards, allowing cross-ventilation and direct sunlight control. In a similar way from the place of remembrance, we proposed a compact volume and created a public space that wasn't asked in the competition brief. The narrow outdoor gaps help prevent the strong solar radiation from heating the interiors, while ensuring natural ventilation to the offices. A circular blind perimeter prevents the rising and setting sun to get inside. Both the buildings and the courtyards are connected by a big central outdoor covered space. A shaded exterior public atrium marks the entrance to the complex, where citizens can enjoy shade and freshness. Once inside, we are still in an open outdoor space covered by a metallic structure that allows warm air to get out and ensure a natural ventilation to all spaces. The lateral courtyards are directly linked to this central space. They frame the entry, the city, and the landscape. All the offices are lighted from these courtyards. And now in 3 minutes, you are going to see one whole day.
this film was
Made
uh,
short after,
short after
the
it was
building
open.
was open. Yeah.
So not all projects are located in such powerful sites as we've seen, but all of them have pre-existing micro conditions that can contribute to the layering of meaning. In a dense urban setting, as in the city of Lima, with 10 million people, individual and collective dwellings deal with the transition between the public-urban realm, the common and collective sphere of the dwellers, and the private and domestic spaces of the single home. In this 11-unit housing project, located in a quite dense environment, folding the perimeter of the building allowed for creating thickness for intimacy, which was declined in other housing projects. In this case, the folding duplicates the facade length and creates contained exterior spaces where views are deepened while preserving the intimacy of the interior. Lateral views are created also from the narrow terraces. Views between the dwellers are possible, a little bit as we did in the pools of the PW houses. The entrance hall is another celebrated space for meeting the neighbors, and we try to be always a transition between the city and the dwellers' smaller community.
In this project, the existence of a little public garden defined the creation of a common vertical garden to provide the intermediate space that protect the apartments from the setting sun. The vertical garden is curved to embrace the public garden, creating a subtle tension between the two. Again, the entrance hall conceived as a threshold, and louvers and vegetation provide here the shelter for intimacy and allow for variation in apartment typologies without altering the unity of the whole. The thickness of intimacy is here reduced to the minimum, but still can create the sense of threshold.
And in this project, located in an old summer resort, now a designated historic district of Lima, we had to follow a preservation guideline-complying facade with vertical openings associated to traditional houses that we don't see there, but it's mandatory. So we took that restraint as an opportunity for creating thickness. And from the street, the facade generates a transversal transparency a kind of porosity of the urban space that goes beyond creating a buffer between public and private realms, a large intermediate space that blurs the boundary between public, urban, and domestic realms. The facade also acts as a screen that defines a reversible threshold, because from the apartments we had this feeling that the city appears as an interior space that is framed by the vertical openings. And the large terraces encourage, as in the pools, as in other projects, the social dynamics between the neighbors.
A similar strategy was used in this house, but in a horizontal direction, where social spaces remain open and flexible, merging interior and exterior, while the three intimate spaces of a large family are located in the upper floor. We ended up by creating an outdoor interior space, a micro-landscape within a confined, typical urban plot.
And as in that house, when we were asked to design a restaurant that could represent Lima's uniqueness in a certain way, in this low-rise but quite dense neighborhood, we decided to take advantage again on these mild climate conditions. And from the street, the building appears as quite opaque and introverted, and 5 modular volumes are supported by an enclosure, again, organizing a series of intermediate spaces. Only the skylights gives us a hint from the exterior of what will be discovered inside. So a small gap takes us to the outdoor interior spaces that you can see here, where each module defines a particular place or atmosphere to it, opening up to a continuous space and blurring boundaries between all these spaces.
The University of Piura, a booming city 1,500 kilometers north from Lima and only 4 degrees south from the equator, needed more space for welcoming a new student population from low-income rural backgrounds, being able to pursue their education thanks to a government scholarship. New facilities of generic classrooms and faculty offices were needed, and their aspiration was to improve teaching infrastructure to welcome 800 new students. 50 years ago, the university campus had a single building in a barren desert, as we can see in the top image. When a strong Niño phenomenon brought heavy rains to the desert in 1983, the authorities grasped this as an opportunity for starting a new campus by planting carob trees instead of buildings. And this vision took the university to look as in this image today. The decision of developing a campus by creating shade in the harshness of the sun and extreme dry heat of the savanna landscape of northern Peru was, of course, a big inspiration for us. The question was about how should be a place for learning here. And Louis Kahn said that schools began with discussions under a tree. As a consequence, the starting point was about creating a great exterior shaded space. Again, the section can help us understand the project. We first draw the soft hills of the tropical dry forest, and then the planted carob trees, and the clearings left by the planners for future buildings. We start by extending the shade of the forest at the place of the building. A single horizontal line is created to define a shaded space capable of creating good conditions for learning. Then, The program grows from the rooftop down to the ground. The result is a series of buildings which are less important than the spaces left in between them, where informal learnings and gathering spaces find their place.
So 11 independent buildings disposed in a regular volume of 70 by 70 meters and 9 meters height are perfectly aligned to their cardinal points, and each building responds very efficiently to its function, like auditoriums with a trapezoidal shape. But creating in-between spaces that are irregular and are favorable for informal learning. These in-between spaces are non-hierarchical and were a good place for students to get to know each other. There were this new population of students that were meeting with the actual students of a private, wealthy university. So this place was meant to be or create a sense of community. And this compact scheme shelters a shaded permeable space allowing natural cross-ventilation from the southern winds that make air conditioning unnecessary. There are only 3 classes that have air conditioning because it's a quality requirement for having points in the qualifying or for the university for postgraduate learning. The building is also permeable in its access from 3 sides, so it becomes like a shaded crossroads within the campus. And today, this has been the only building to be studied after it was finished by the university. And today, there are a lot of like numbers, but what we like is that almost 40% of the people in the complex don't have classes in it now at a given time. So it has become a place to stay, to meet other people and have informal conversation. That was our first aim. And the strategy of discrete buildings within a regular shape was a good answer for that, but also for the extremely tight schedule for the construction. We had only 15 months to do everything, 7 months to build inside these 15 months. And also by building regulations, because there's a very tight paraseismic regulations for the educational buildings, because they are meant to be shelters in case of a huge disaster. So there were 6 types that allowed to build one after the other by different construction teams, as we can see here. So the teams were shifting from one building to the other, so that allowed us to build almost 10,000 square meters in 7 months.
Following the logics of an oriented building, the south and north facade are protected by vertical louvers, while in the west facade, a system of prefab concrete panels that you saw previously protected the faculty offices from the setting sun. On the east side facade, the east side faces the access from the campus, from the pedestrian pathway, and hosts the ramps that connected both levels inside the building. The lattice shuttering serves as a light modulator in order to accommodate our eyes to the shaded half light spaces while we go up through the ramps or just entering the building.
And because we are almost in the equator, the sun in summer time the sun comes from the south, and in winter time from the north. So the narrow gaps that single buildings leave for seismic reasons allows us to introduce light, ventilation, and because the gaps are oriented north-south and east-west, they act also as calendars and sun clocks, no? Depending on the orientation. So there are also places where the calendars meet the clocks in the campus. And these are the in-between spaces that we were talking about.
There are, so all through the building, different spaces where people can gather, rest, or chat, different scales, dimensions. Spaces are modulated to favor different kinds of gathering, even an informal class. And as we get into the complex, these spaces become more important until we arrive to its core, where the intermediate spaces are crossed by a stretch of the tropical dry forest.
So let's see now again a day-long video in 3 minutes. He was really running late. It was not for the video purposes. So in all these projects, we find the need to recontextualize our practice, and it was made by grounding it. And we found that only by being radical in the etymological term, from having roots, that we started identifying the local essentials on which meaning is built. So being local does not only mean using local materials or reproducing vernacular architecture. It is mainly paying careful attention to reality. But on the other hand, the global condition is not an opposing entity for us. It can be understood beyond the aggressive homogenization of globalization and considered as the sum of countless local interventions, no? Like a hybridization phenomenon that frees ourselves from a binary condition, no? That is very usual, that north, south, rich, poor, technological, artisanal, etc. And recognizing ourselves and our projects in a diversity. And it can help us define a shared ground of practice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the very beautiful lecture. I'm sure there's some questions.
Hello, thank you for your lecture. It's clear how you have a strong approach on landscape and human being, and I think that's beautiful. Coming from South America, from Brazil, I can understand where it comes from, and I see how much it comes from the landscape, from Peru and everything. But you start working in France. So my question is, when and how this approach came, and do you think how you will be working? Do you think you will have the same approach on your practice if you were mainly working in France, and how that could be different? I can imagine that could be completely different.
Yeah. No, in fact, we understood our conditions, our Peruvians' conditions, once we were out there, like once we were working in Paris, and I think distance helped a lot for us in that sense, and we had the opportunity to design the first of this series of houses in the beach at south of Lima while we were working there, so in France. And we start to ask questions with this distance. So how should be architecture in that place with that conditions and all of that. And we thought we had never asked that questions before leaving to not, and then now after like 16 years working in Peru, and we are very sensible to this, as Jean-Pierre was saying at the end, at this idea of being radical, so rooted to the place and very listen carefully to the conditions, to the tangible and intangible conditions. We had the opportunity 3 years ago to do a competition in France, in the coast, in the Atlantic coast, and our approach was totally a Peruvian or a Peruvian approach, or the way we do architecture in Peru has completely changed the way we approach this project in France. So,
yeah, but there are a lot of things that are different. We don't want you to think that working in Peru is easier because of the climate, or because there's no perfect place.
I can see that.
There are other problems, different problems, but mainly the difference is in what you are expecting from when you design from the building processes. So here you must be absolutely sure, and the design process ends with the execution drawings. And then you have to check out that the building is built as you intended. Okay, and you have a lot of power in the construction process because the architect is responsible of the construction. In Peru, you're not responsible of the construction. So there, in many, most of the projects, architects don't intervene during construction process. We try to do it, and it's a condition that we accept the encargos, the
Commissions.
the commissions. And we have, fourthly, to create a dialogue not only with the client, but with the builders, which have to respect and to understand the project, no? But they are also modifying the project because it's handmade. So these two different conditions are changing the way we design. For instance, because we're not responsible for the construction in Peru, space is always in danger, no? The permanence of space. But in a country where there are big earthquakes, the only thing that people respect is the structure. So designing a project where space is defined by structure and not other than there's no dry walls or only the structure, it allows for a perennity in the space. That's what we want, which doesn't mean it is not transformed in time, but the essential things for the building are defined with the structure. So there are a lot of
There's more
differences.
space for the unexpected.
Yeah.
Yes, but actually in this last project in France, I was thinking about this idea of being sensible to the territory and the geographic conditions that before working in Paris, that was not like a question or a, no?
It was impossible because the landscape architect tells you, okay, my work begins from the facade outside and your work, and now we are trying to blur all these boundaries, no? Which is...
Yeah, in our country we can, but in France, the approach changed completely, I think, after our Peruvian experience changed completely the way we...
For me, it's quite interesting what you said, that you had to leave to really see your country, and I can relate with this feeling very much.
Yes.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your lecture. You said in the beginning, and you also said it now, that you moved to Europe to understand your own reality, and you kind of answered also how you approach this understanding. But I would be interested to know what elements from the experience in France did you bring back with you to Peru? You also said something now, but if you could say a bit more about that.
Yes. I think first of this knowledge or approach to the space and light. I was studying, and Jean-Pierre was working with Henri Siriani, that it's a French-Peruvian architect that was really an expert in managing ideal conditions to live or to inhabit. And we really learned from him this, and this we took it, of course, to France and then to Peru. And then the other thing is our experience in making or in working in social housing make us very sensible to the relation of quality of space, even if you are working in very little surfaces. So it's not a question of doing big spaces, but it's a question of proportions and relations to light, to the sensations you can have in the space, because it's mainly because of the form of the space and the light. So it's starting architecture from the interior, from the inside. In Peru, I think we were trained when students to think of architecture from the exterior as a volume, no? A relation of volumes. And so with Siriani in France, we discovered. And then we had the opportunity to travel to see a lot of Le Corbusier's building. And also we had lots of learnings there. And all of that came back with us.
Yeah, another thing I think is that we brought back to Peru is I was telling that everything should be defined in the execution drawings here, because it's what is going to be built. And you don't need all that in Peru. But we do it anyway, because it's the only way to know exactly what you want. So when things start to becoming chaotic, as in every project happens, because there's no money or change of rules, of regulations, etc., 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 that allows us to modify the project without weakening it, because we know what we want. For instance, in the Place of Remembrance, the contractor left after the structure was finished, and he stole like $1 million from the $5 million we had to build. So we had to rephrase everything, you know. But that all because we knew what we wanted, we could completely change, or not completely, change a lot of things without betraying the project.
Thank you.
I observed that a lot or most of your projects had a subtle use of color here or there, combined with exposed concrete that also characterized your work. I just was curious if this color was part also of your process or of the concept of the architecture, or were just kind of these final things that you thought about while designing? No?
Yeah, it really started with the first houses, where we didn't have the awareness of the benefits of concrete in that precise landscape. So we were building in a traditional way with confined bearing walls, brick and plastered and painted. So, but we were already aware of the problems of color, in the sense that we are building in a landscape, in a desert, where even if there's a lot of advantages, there's also a lot of dust. So buildings age in 6 months, they look terribly.
Especially if they are white.
Especially
Okay.
if you don't use the correct colors. So we started to use sand colors with some accents. And when we switched to concrete, we switched to concrete because we found it was better built as that, in the sense of irregularity and imperfection, and the quality of exposed concrete with artisanal formwork is that after 3 or 6 months, the color of the concrete is exactly the same color of the soil, because it's full of dust. So, and you don't notice. So we started to use concrete not as a fancy aesthetic mood, but because it's the way the building merges with the landscape, and the other colors that give life in the interior were kept. So each time there's different reasons. For instance, in the last project, in this one, the university asked us in this central space to put the colors of the university, which was nothing that we could want. But we integrated it with other colors, so with a harmony of colors. So you are not entering in the university blue and white colors. So the colors is a contingent way to express things also.
And in the interiors, we are mainly working or with leaving the concrete or with white to reflect better light. Depends on the size or proportion of the space. And but white is never outside because of this. And when we start to do these houses it was a moment in Peruvian architecture where architects were doing lots of beach houses on the coast, and they were all white houses. So we were marking a different way of approaching this intervention in the desert, no?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
No, you're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Ahí cerramos nomás.
Okay.
Esta no sé si es de nosotros.
No.
No, no.